What's up, Meta Nerds? In this video, we're going to go over how the Confederate Navy was organized, and touch on some of the roles of its most important leaders. So at the very top, we have the founder of the Confederate Navy, Count Dooku. He recruited the Kaleesh cyborg General Grevious, and appointed him the leader of the Separatist droid army. He was also one of the most trusted members of the CIS Navy, and headed two of the most important ships in the Confederacy, the Malevolence and the Invisible Hand, and was responsible for both planning and carrying out some of the most important battles during the Clone Wars, including the Battle of Coruscant. The Navy itself was composed of flotillas, destroyers, and frigates, which were all built and donated by the hundreds of star systems who wanted to remain independent from the Republic, with most of these battleships being donated by the Trade Federation. The Trade Federation was originally established just to work out disputes between different shipping firms, but by the year 100 BBY, it had become a sort of mega corporation, which had tons of lobbying power in the Republic, and an enormous fleet of ships, which they used to conduct trade across countless star systems. Militaries were illegal under the Republic, but some modifications to ships were overlooked, under the reasonable argument that things like battle droids were actually being made to protect the ship from pirates. A perfect storm occurred in the form of Darth Sidious manipulating Nute Gunray, increased taxation from the Republic, and the Trade Federation realizing that they could get away with building ships and vehicles that could be used for a lot more than just protecting yourself from pirates. After the invasion of Naboo, the Trade Federation was forced to strip these vehicles of their weapons, but many military-grade warships were still being produced, and the existing ships were just slightly modified in order to pass the regulations. One of the first allies to the Separatists was Kavik Toth, a man in charge of his own mercenary ring, who donated a sizable fleet that made up what was called Sabbath Squadron, units that actually saw combat against the Republic during the First Battle of Geonosis. Many of the ships in the Confederate Navy were able to be commanded by droid officers, but the Separatists still preferred to have organic captains and admirals. There were some notable commanders like Dirge and Asajj Ventress, but they had multiple roles within the Confederacy, whereas admirals like Porus Toneth, Kurst, and Admiral Trench were responsible for leading entire fleets of ships, and were some of the best tacticians during the Clone Wars. Admiral Trench's name alone could strike fear into the Republic command, and there were several occasions where his tactics destroyed entire Republic fleets. He was presumed dead at the Battle of Malastare Narrows, and he was thought to have been killed again during the Battle of Christophsis, but he survived this defeat as well. But the entire left side of his body was damaged, requiring cybernetics in his left eye, 3 left arms, and even his left mandible. He later pops up leading the Separatist forces during the Battle of Ringovinda. The subjugator class heavy cruiser known as the Malevolence used its unique ion cannons to destroy Republic supply lines before it was taken out by a Jedi strike team. But there was also its sister ship, the Devastation, which Dooku placed under the command of the Night Sister known as Sai Surku. Grievous also attempted to rebuild this flagship, and dubbed it the Malevolence too, but that was also destroyed during the Battle of Khalida Nebula, again by those pesky Jedi. An important part of the Navy were those known as the Overseers, who were tasked with watching over the different slaves, who were used to build many of the CIS warships. On some worlds, they used organics instead of droids, because they knew that if the Republic destroyed these shipyards, it would result in the deaths of millions of innocent people, causing outrage throughout the Republic Senate. Some of the largest space battles during the Clone Wars happened at Quell, Kamino, Umbara, Ryloth, Lola Seyu, and Sereno, and General Grievous led many attacks from the Invisible Hand across all kinds of targets in the Inner Rim, Mid-Rim, and especially the Outer Rim, the latter of which he would personally take over entire star systems. The Republic was then drawn out to try and stop the CIS takeover, and this became known as the Outer Rim Sieges. And once a large number of Republic forces had been dedicated to the Outer Rim section, General Grievous took a fleet of thousands of ships in a surprise attack on Coruscant, the heart of the Republic, and was able to capture Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Despite having the upper hand, Grievous and his remaining forces had to retreat through hyperspace, and this would be one of the last major battles of the Clone Wars. Even though the newly appointed Darth Vader took out most of the CIS leadership, there were still plenty of droid armies and whole armadas of ships spread out across the galaxy. And so in the years following the Clone Wars, some of them were picked up by Geyser Delzo when he tried to resist Imperial rule, creating a holdout on Mustafar that was eventually crushed by the 501st. And some CIS ships lived on to fight with the Rebel Alliance. So that's it for its history, but I also wanted to explain that the Confederate Navy had 6 levels to its command structure, broken up into a section, flight, squadron, task group, task force, and a fleet. The section was the smallest group, and it was normally 2 to 4 vessels commanded by a captain, plus the maintenance and support crews. The flight was 2 to 4 sections, so anywhere from 4 to 16 vessels, and was commanded by a Commodore, with a squadron then making up 3 to 4 flights, so 12 to 64 vessels, also commanded by a Commodore, but who would lead from a prominent battleship. A task group was composed of 3 to 10 squadrons, so 36 to 640 vessels, and would be commanded by a rear admiral, and the second highest level was a task force, which was composed of 2 separate task groups, so anywhere from 72 to 1,280 vessels, and was commanded by someone who held the rank of a vice admiral, and the highest level in the Imperial Navy was the fleet, which was composed of 3 separate task groups, containing anywhere from 200 to 4,000 vessels, and was always commanded by an admiral. The entire Confederate Navy contained hundreds of separate fleets. So that's it for the Confederate Navy. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to check out our social media, or ways that you can help support this channel, be sure to check out the description down below. If you want to see more, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so that you get notifications. But more important than all that, remember, the CIS definitely had one of the most unique looking navies, and the Force will be with you, always.